Beer? Beer.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Beer? Thank you all for coming. I'd like to introduce Dr. Amy Twigger Holroyd of Keep and Share, who has spent 10 years teaching us a lot about knitting. Amy.
Thank you, Rachael. Well, I've given a lot of talks in my time, but I think this is going to be one of the oddest ones. I'll try and give you some edited highlights of Keep and Share, the first 10 years. The more considered and long-winded version is in the pamphlets, which are just on the thing there. Emma will wave one, which is my longer version of the story, so please do all take one of those. Yes, so I don't know, I guess it's a knitter's brain that I'm a bit obsessed with numbers, so when I realised that it was going to be the 10-year anniversary of having started Keep and Share, I wanted to celebrate in some way. I mentioned to Rachael and she said, come and have a party, can we host you at Pricky Finger? So thank you, Rachael, for having me. Yeah, so it is exactly 10 years to the day since the first Keep and Share thing. Wow. Exactly. Okay, so when people ask what is Keep and Share now, I can say it's an experimental knitwear label and an open craft practice. And I didn't say that at the beginning, 10 years ago. I didn't have that title. But basically for 10 years I've been exploring the relationship between fashion, making, design and sustainability. They're all the things I'm interested in. In preparation for the 10-year looking back, I was trying to make sense of everything that I'd done, and so, as you do, I made a timeline of activity, trying to organise things into different areas and strands. So basically I put that into show. That's a lot of things, isn't it? Everything I do that is Keep and Share, well, everything I do to do with knitting is Keep and Share, and it kind of fits into 3 categories. So, first one is knitwear. So everything's related to knitting really, but this is in terms of kind of me designing and making pieces of knitwear, and it was the first sort of strand of Keep and Share and where it all started. Okay, so Keep and Share started actually before the 10-year point, by me doing my MA from 2002 to 2003. So I'd done a fashion degree and started to specialise in knitwear, and then I went to do my MA at the Manchester School of Art. And there was 2 things that I was really exploring there. One is the amazing capacity of the knitted structure to form 3-dimensional shapes without sewing. So I've been obsessed by that for more than 10 years, and I expect it to keep obsessing me for many years to come. And the second thing which I became interested in during the work I was doing was the ideas of design for sustainability, and particularly the idea of sufficiency. So how you can, rather than making the same stuff a bit greener, how you can be satisfied and delighted by less stuff. And I thought that the way you could do that was by keeping things for longer and by using things in different ways. And so that's kind of longevity and versatility of keeping and sharing. So that's the meaning of Keep and Share, the origin of Keep and Share. So I created this collection of pieces where the idea was that they would age gracefully and that they would fit any person and could be worn in lots of different ways. So after I did my MA, I moved from Paris to Hereford, one international fashion centre to another, and there weren't many fashion jobs for me to do in Hereford, so I launched the business, kind of taking the concept that I developed during my MA into a real life business, which is what I wanted to do anyway, really. And so in the next 6 years I made 12 seasonal collections of knitwear, so 2 collections a year. And so all the pieces that are hanging in here are from those collections. And for each collection I worked with my photographer Meg, and we would have fun going to finding somewhere that would tell the story that we were trying to tell, and doing photo shoots. So I was still trying to explore the ideas about longevity and versatility as I developed in my MA. And one thing that's kind of interesting to try and do with fashion that seems to be inherently ephemeral is try to work out how you can make things that will be satisfying over time. It's obviously not impossible because I have pieces in my wardrobe that I've worn for many, many years without them kind of passing by. And so, but it's interesting to try and work out how you can design for that. And so my strategy is to combine elements that are kind of archetypal and familiar with unconventional ways of constructing things, which is my kind of seamless three-dimensional knitting thing. So the cardie on the left kind of references kind of the placement of embroidery on a classic kind of twin set, the cardigan of a twin set, but making it in a seamless three-dimensional loopy way. So as I went along, each collection had its own identity and quite a strong kind of narrative to it, but there were shapes that I developed and kind of developed evolving versions of as I went along. And there were some pieces which actually in themselves kind of stayed the same. So this is my Gladys cardie, which was actually first part of the Autumn-Winter 2005 collection, and then was so popular that I just kept making it ever since. Okay, so by 2010 I'd kind of a bit run out of steam of making seasonal collections, and I created a more permanent classic collection, which was mainly pieces taken from kind of the archive of previous designs, and a couple of new designs in there. I still make knitwear now, so I'll make pieces to commission from the archive. So all of these pieces are on my website, and people can look through and say, well, I really like that one from Spring/Summer 2006, but can I have it in pale pink wool or something, and I'll make it like that. Okay, so now we're on to making. Over the years I developed another strand of activity, which was to do with me making a different kind of work and also me supporting other people making. So when I used to do craft fairs and shows and things like that, the very frequent question was, can I buy the patterns for this item? And I would say, no, it's machine knitted, it doesn't translate easily to hand knitting. And I'll be honest, to begin with, that was quite annoying, because when you spent a long time designing and making a collection of knitwear, and photographing it and putting it out there and hoping that people buy the actual things, when they go, oh, these are nice, can I knit one? Like, oh, no. But then after a while I realised that actually people's desire to make things themselves was obviously a really good thing and something I would like to support. And in terms of the longevity idea of keep and share, ideally if people have made things themselves, that'll have a whole extra kind of story to it and level of emotional attachment that might contribute to them wanting to keep that thing for a long time. So I started making, I've only done a couple, but hand knit versions of my machine knit patterns, so that can come as a pattern or as a kit.
What was that? Is it
yes,
a little cake?
it is the same shape as this one, exactly the same shape.
It's lovely.
Yeah, so it's a little cake, and so yeah, it's completely seamless. So it's knitted in yes, so it's the same shape, and a lot of my pieces are very geometric, so they look a bit puzzling when they're off the body, and then they kind of make sense when they have a person inside them, and they often look quite different on different people, which I really like. So around the same time, so this is about 6 years ago-ish, we can check the timeline if we want to know exactly, I started running workshops that were mainly skills, so teaching people how to use a knitting machine, teaching them how to knit, hand knit, but also one where you could come and knit Gladys cardie, so this one, in a weekend, and that was always fun because people would turn up like, I won't be able to do it, I don't know, I've never touched a knitting machine, oh, it's impossible, and then they go away wearing their cardies. That was very satisfying at the end. And then another thing that kind of goes along with this strand of activity is me running the Keep and Share knitting tent. So I'd already been selling at music festivals for a few summers. I kind of quite like doing pop-up shop type events rather than craft fairs. And we'd had fun doing the festivals, and then realised we could extend that activity and kind of run a free drop-in communal knitting activity at the same time. So all of the tags that are on the windowsill at the front of the shop are people come along and knit, and we ask them to write a comment of some sort, they're usually to do with knitting, and attach it to the bit of knitting that they've done. And so actually I have to give credit to Simon, my husband, who painstakingly removed all of the tags from 3 years worth of knitting, which is a huge amount, and we kind of aggregated the tags and comments to some really nice ones to read. And so along with that I was kind of doing other communal knitting projects. The cardigan is my preferred format for all work. But occasionally I step outside it, like knitting a BMW engine, for example. So this is a lesson in never boast that you can knit anything. Like, BMW engine, I can knit that. Oh, you actually want me to do that? Okay, now I have to understand how an engine works. I do understand how an engine works now. So that when I was installing this, it was a residency at BMW Plant Hams Hall for Lichfield Festival, and I worked with a class of 30 local school kids, taught them to knit, French knit and crochet, and then they helped me make this. And I installed it in the foyer of the BMW plant, and I understood so much how an engine worked that when a guy walked past and said, "You got the timing wrong on your intake crankshaft," I was able to adjust said part, and he was impressed. Great hilarity ensued. Yeah, so that was a fun escapade. But not all of these making things are about communal kind of knitting with other people. Sometimes it's about me making things which are different to the keep and share things. So when or the keep and share knitwear. So when I'm designing and making those, I'm thinking about what other people want to wear, how long it takes to make, how much it'll cost, creating them as part of a collection. And these pieces are about me kind of exploring an idea and creating work that's more for exhibition, really, whether that's in a gallery or on me. And so this piece was my first experiment in a technique that I named stitch hacking, which is a way of retrospectively altering the stitches within an existing piece of knitwear. So I kind of open up fabric and ladder it and reform the stitches, kind of repairing it, but repairing it differently to how it originally was, and there wasn't actually anything wrong with it in the first place. So basically everything I'd been doing in the other areas kept leading me to have conversations with people that gave me ideas about things I wanted to explore in a bigger way than I could do kind of within my practice as it was. And so there was two strands of the things I've already shown you that kind of fed into that. So the first one is about people's experiences of making and wearing homemade clothes. So these are two tags from the knitting tent. And so I asked people how they felt about, I'd put share your feelings about wearing homemade clothes, I think. So basically they fall into two camps. And so there's the romantic half, which is about the brilliant satisfaction of making things yourself and how there's love and all of these wonderful feelings caught up in it. And then there's some really bitter negative stories. And this is my favourite one. I wore a hat I made in textiles once and was socially shunned from there on after. Yeah, there's quite a few like that. And so I guess I gathered those stories from the knitting tent, but I also knew them from running workshops and people's concerns and questions when they came to the workshops. And there was people with really, really good making skills who were kind of scared of making creative decisions. Yeah, of deciding like what colour they should make, or if they were allowed to alter a pattern. I was really interested in kind of both the thing about the hope that you have when you start making something, and then sometimes the disappointment that you feel when you finished it. A lot of this is from personal experience. I'm not being bitter about other people. Yeah, so the kind of what that experience is in a culture where most clothes that people wear are mass produced, but also the experience of trying to be creative and wanting to be creative and wanting to kind of step outside, using patterns and things that people told me was what they wanted to do. So that was one strand. So I wanted to kind of explore that and think about how I might be able to support people to feel more confident in doing that. And then the second one is kind of extending from the stitch hacking work, which was about a particular technique of opening a knitted garment and altering the stitches, and broadening it out to many different ways, every different way even, of retrospectively altering an existing piece of knitting. That turned into this, kind of like diagrams. So I was trying to think about all the different ways that you could possibly rework an existing item of knitwear, and that might be because it's damaged, it's got something, or it doesn't fit you properly, or it could just be because it's a bit boring and you want to change it. And I used I looked through old sources, so old books that had kind of advice on how to rework things, but they were often kind of remedial, like you've got holes in your elbows, so this is what you do to fix holes in your elbows. Well, sleeves rather than elbows themselves. And I tried to rework it into something that you could do to any garment, whether you had problems or not, and you might pick quite a different solution than a kind of prescriptive linear set of instructions would give you. So you start with your jumper at the top and you can go down any of the paths.
Genius.
Okay.
Genius.
So this is part of my PhD work. So this was, I tried out 5 of the treatments, as I call them, 5 things that you can do to an old jumper on the same garment. I worked with a small group of knitters in Hereford who the project kind of culminated in each of them reworking an item of knitwear from their own wardrobe. And so I wanted to help them by being kind of one step ahead and having tried to do it myself on my own garment. And so it turned into a kind of nice sampler type thing. So this is a replaced cuff. That's a stitch hacked initials. This is cardiganised, a popular treatment. Afterthought pocket with a nod to Elizabeth Zimmerman, and integral embellish for the little frills because they're actually knitted on. My obsession with seamlessness comes back here because I don't really like knitting things and then sewing them on. I really like to kind of knit them in and through. So the kind of outcome of that was I built a resource, a re-knitting resource, which is on my website, and then all of the stuff about the kind of the experiences of making things and the experiences of designing, because when you're reworking an item of knitwear you have to design because you can't follow a set pattern because every existing thing is different, and so the knitters I worked with, I was kind of encouraging them to design and make creative decisions, and I found they basically supported each other to do that. They didn't really, I just created the permission to do it, and so all of those stories and insights ended up in a big black book in true PhD style. Okay, so we're nearly there. So then the question, what next? What are you going to do next? What's the next 10 years? So basically, Keep and Share is just whatever knitting related things I'm doing. It'll involve more knitting, more slowness, and quite a lot of tinkering. I think now a lot about what I do as being tinkering with existing things, and tinkering not being a sort of marginal, meaningless activity, but kind of where the interesting stuff happens. And so that's tinkering with garments, still a lot of that to be done. Tinkering with the fashion system, do that through the garments, that's good. And tinkering with the Keep and Share stuff that I've created in the 10 years, kind of working back into that and seeing how I can revisit it and reinvent it and kind of extend it and share it with people in different ways. And then I think there's just one more, which is say thank you for listening. Thank you to Rachel for having me. Thank you to Simon for doing quite a lot of things in every one of those items without any credit most of the time. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Knit them in and through.
Amy,
Yes.
can I just say something as knitted that? What is so brilliant about this is you've done it on probably an industrially knitted thing, so you've done handwork on that. So this is remarkably fine. This reminds me of going to Ahmedabad, and the textile museum there were that the Mughal tents were made with fine embroideries where they would have like one thread of silk made in one and these incredible seams. It's incredibly remarkable to do handwork in that.
Well, that was part of the challenge. I wanted the treatments that I did to be applicable to any item of weft knitted knitwear, which is most knitwear. And so most things that we have are industrially made and finer gauge than you would hand knit. And so the geekiest part of my PhD thesis is the part where we work out how to get from this gauge to a hand knit gauge and get it to lay flat. And then when I was working with the ratios that you need to do that, I found that you could make them into nice patterns using slip stitches, and then kind of went off on a big thing with that. So yeah, changing gauge in knitting, I'm really into it. We need
How
more.
did
more
you
of it.
do that though?
You can pick up the they are quite small.
Yeah, were you knitting with pins?
Well, no, it's like, because you can get these really thin knitting needles for people that want to knit like tiny little jumpers for some reason. And so I use those for far more practical use, which is picking up all of the stitches on it.
So what size of needle is that one?
You can use like probably a 1 millimetre needle, or a 0.7 millimetre is the smallest you can get. They are quite.
When you're working that out, presumably that's a mathematical theory that you're working through. Do you have to write it down and work it out mathematically, or is it something quite creative? What's the line there?
Well, my mum and dad are here, and they both helped me with some spreadsheets where we were working through and a big list of ratios. But some ratios don't knit very nicely, so you have to use like maths logic and knitting logic. Some things, yeah, you could knit them, but it looks rubbish. So there's some ratios.
Mathematically on paper, but it doesn't work when you
Yeah,
look at the yarn.
yeah. When you put your knitter's brain on it, you're like 7 to 3. We know that's just not good. They're not good knitting numbers. I hope some people are nodding sagely. Oh yeah, 7 to 3. Oh,
Yeah.
that's never going to work. Yeah, and if you're going from something really fine to something quite chunky, you have to do it in 2 steps. So then you have to have 2 sets of ratios, and then it looks best if those 2 transitions have some kind of mathematical relationship to each other. But that really narrowed down the options, because at first, to go from this one to this one had like 444 versions or something, and that was a bit overwhelming even for me. But when I narrowed it down to the ones that looked nice, I ended up with like 21 different ways that you could do it, and that was more satisfying. Yes. Thank you, that's the most anyone's ever asked me about changing gauge. Well, it's quite a niche topic. Thank you for going there with me.
Does anyone have any further questions for Amy?
Yes, Danny. I'm just wondering, just the kind of partially, slightly drunk, slightly philosophical question. How you see this in relationship to a concept of time travel, going back and re-altering the past as a kind of a paradigm shift. You know, the fact that you're thinking in this way, because a doctorate is incredible. I mean, particularly in the arts and particularly in textiles, in craft, which hasn't been recognised, because you have to do something which has never been done before, be judged by your peers, and they don't know that it hasn't been done before, and actually you don't know that it hasn't been done before, but you still have to prove it. So actually what you've done is, you know, wouldn't it be nice to slip back in time in some way and actually re-knit something that had happened? And I see it as a philosophical parallel, correct? Does that make any sense to you, or do you need more red wine too?
I think I would have to digest that one.
But the time element, sorry, a bit more, the fact that something was made before, and the values, and then you go back and remake it.
I definitely see the act of tinkering things which exist and that were made previously as a way of, that it makes you think about much bigger systems. And so if you play with a garment, it makes you think that you can change other things as well.
That's actually what I mean. So how do you think that could actually apply? Because you have a very tenuous link. You know, how many billions of people are there in the world, and yet you've come up with something new, this idea, and you've proved it. So how do you think you could, and where would you work with that as an idea to expand it?
I don't know. I think that it's important to encourage people that making isn't always making something new, that remaking is making, and that maybe it engages you more with the world around you than always trying to put a new thing into the world. Kind of seeing the things around you as ripe for alteration is quite a powerful thing. But I see it, you see it, and this is making something new, but when you teach someone to knit for the first time, sometimes they're making stitches and then they're like, oh, is this how clothes are made? And like, you see this, like, they're connecting this act of like making some stitches that they're doing really like ham-fisted with like, oh, and then sometimes go like, oh, my granny must be really clever. And I'm like, yeah. Trying to raise appreciation of grannies everywhere. But we did it in the workshops with the knitters. One of the early workshops, we started taking apart some knitted garments, and I purposely got really scrappy ones from the really like skanky charity shop in Hereford that sell really dirty things, so that we felt like it was okay to take them apart. But the act of undoing something which has been done is quite powerful, and so that's not a specialist, doesn't have to be a specialist technical thing. Taking something apart with care to see how it was made. I think there's quite a lot of movements doing that in different areas, so it's kind of connecting that together. But yeah, I think like tiny acts of playing with things and changing your perceptions of how you see those things and what you think you can do to them. It's quite powerful what you can do with just 2 sticks and some yarn.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Does anyone else have any questions?
No questions, but
I'm just, you know, it's great that you've done this fantastic work. I've been so sort of amazed by the stitch hacking in particular because of the sort of detail. But I'm still. People are still surprised that there is this link between knitting and maths, and you know it's there. It's in all textiles actually, and I don't know if any of you know the Mary Harris exhibition she did, Maths and Knitting, a long time ago. It's now housed at the Constance Howard archive. But she showed all these wonderful mathematical principles by socks, your baby's socks, you know, symmetry. And anyway, I just it's just I sort of like to, you know, just celebrate what you've done. So congratulations. I used to go knitting round when I was doing my maths degree, and they used to, well, you know, it was like madness.
That's what we do for you, maths and a knitting degree.
Yeah, exactly.
All being the same thing. Yes. Well, thank you. We can do more questions.
Amy's
more
here all
informally.
night. Does anybody want to drink? We still have beer and wine and all the rest of it. And then Simon has bought some records.
I will
we
play
can
records. We'll
move this.